At sunset, the sky over northern Burkina Faso turned red, but it was not only the sun that burned that evening. It began as a normal journey. A large truck, loaded with fresh tomatoes, rolled slowly along a dusty road in the northern savannah. The air was hot and dry. Tall yellow grass stretched for miles. The wind carried fine sand across the road. The engine hummed. The driver wiped sweat from his forehead. Inside the truck, wooden crates were stacked high, bright red tomatoes, fresh from nearby farms. They were meant for the market, for families, for children. The sun was sinking low. The sky was orange and purple. Then everything changed. From the tall, dry grass, shadows moved. At first, it was just a sound, the snap of dry branches. Then armed men rushed out of the bush. Gunshots exploded in the quiet air. The driver slammed the brakes. The truck shook violently. The tomatoes shifted and crashed inside the wooden crates. The attackers surrounded the vehicle. More gunshots. The windshield shattered. The air filled with screaming. The smell of fear mixed with dust and heat. One of the armed men threw something burning onto the truck. Flames erupted instantly. The fire spread fast across the wooden crates. Tomatoes spilled onto the ground, rolling into the sand like drops of blood. Some burst open under the heat. Red juice mixed with dust. Thick black smoke rose into the sky. The sunset disappeared behind it. The driver jumped out and ran into the grass. His heart pounded like a drum. Behind him, the truck was fully on fire. The sound of crackling wood. The smell of burning metal. The tomatoes popping in the flames. In the distance, goats scattered. Birds flew up suddenly from the trees. The peaceful savannah had turned into chaos. Villagers nearby saw the smoke rising high into the sky. Mothers grabbed their children. Men ran toward the road carefully, hiding behind trees. When the attackers finally disappeared back into the bush, silence returned. But it was a terrible silence. The truck was destroyed. The tomatoes were ruined. The road was black with ash. The sky had turned dark. Hours later, the news reached Ouagadougou. And when Ibrahim Traoré heard what had happened, witnesses say his face changed. He did not shout. He did not panic. But his eyes were filled with anger. "These were farmers' goods," he said quietly. "Food for our people." He stood up immediately. "Prepare the helicopter," he ordered. "I am going there." Advisors tried to speak. "It may not be safe, Mr. President." He turned to them. "If it is not safe for my people, then it is not safe for me to stay in an office." The room fell silent. As night covered the savannah, the burned truck still smoked under the stars. And far away, the sound of helicopter blades began to cut through the dark sky. Something had been ignited that night. Not just a truck, not just tomatoes, but a response. Before the sun rose, the sound of helicopter blades shook the quiet northern sky. The smoke from the burned truck was still rising when the helicopter landed on the dusty road. Soldiers jumped out first, scanning the tall, dry grass. The wind pushed the ash across the ground. Then Ibrahim Traoré stepped down. He looked at the destroyed truck. The metal frame was twisted and black. The tires were melted. The wooden crates were gone. On the ground, crushed tomatoes were mixed with sand and ash. Red stains covered the road like wounds. The air still smelled of smoke and burned rubber. Traoré walked slowly toward the wreck. No cameras, no celebration, only silence. The driver stood nearby, shaking. His clothes were covered in dust. His eyes were red. The president walked up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are alive," Traoré said quietly. The driver nodded but could not speak. Villagers gathered at a distance. Some women cried softly. A young boy picked up a half-burned tomato from the ground and stared at it. Traoré turned to his commanders. "This is not just an attack on a truck," he said firmly. "It is an attack on our farmers, on our food, on our future." The wind moved through the tall grass, making it wave like a restless sea. One soldier approached with information. "Mr. President, witnesses say the attackers escaped toward the northern bush. They were heavily armed." Traoré's jaw tightened. "Then we follow them," he replied. He stepped onto the burned road and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "My people," he said, "they want to make us afraid. They want to burn our work. They want to divide us." His voice grew stronger. "But we are one Africa, one people. No one will terrorize our land and walk away. The villagers listened in silence. A mother holding her child began to clap softly. Then others joined. Not loud, but steady. Traoré turned back to his military officers. Launch the operation immediately. Secure the villages. Protect the farmers. I want drones in the air and patrol units moving now. The soldiers moved quickly. Engines started. Radios crackled. The tension was rising. As the first armored vehicles rolled down the dusty road, the president stood beside the burned truck one last time. The sun finally rose behind him. Its light touched the red stains on the ground, and in that moment, everyone felt it. This was no longer just about tomatoes. It was about dignity. It was about protection. It was about a leader who refused to hide. Far in the distance, hidden in the dry bush, the attackers did not yet know. They were being hunted. In the dry northern bush, the hunters became the hunted. The armored vehicles moved slowly across the rough land. Dust rose behind them like a long brown cloud. Drones buzzed high above the savannah, their cameras scanning every movement in the tall yellow grass. The heat was already strong, even though it was still morning. Sweat ran down the faces of the soldiers. The wind carried the smell of smoke from the burned truck, still hanging in the air like a reminder. Inside a command vehicle, maps were spread across a metal table. Red circles marked villages, blue lines showed possible escape routes. President Ibrahim Traoré stood over the map. They went north, a commander said. There is a dry riverbed 5 kilometers ahead. It is a perfect place to hide. Traoré nodded. Then that is where we go. The convoy split into 2 units. One moved along the main dirt path. The other cut through rough terrain, driving between small trees and rocks. Birds flew up suddenly as engines roared through the quiet land. In a nearby village, soldiers helped evacuate families to safer ground. Children cried as they were lifted into trucks. An old man refused to leave his goats until a young soldier gently helped him. "We will protect your home," the soldier promised. Back in the bush, a drone operator suddenly shouted, "Movement spotted!" On the small screen, dark figures were running between trees. "They are armed," the operator said. Traoré stepped closer to the screen. His eyes were sharp. "Move carefully," he ordered. "No harm to civilians." The soldiers advanced slowly. Every step was tense. Every sound in the grass made hearts beat faster. Then, gunfire exploded again. Bullets cut through the dry air. Soldiers dropped behind rocks. The noise echoed across the land. Dust and dirt jumped from the ground as shots hit the earth. One soldier was hit in the arm. "Medic!" someone shouted. Another soldier dragged him behind cover. Blood stained the sand, but the soldier was still alive. The firefight grew intense. The attackers tried to escape through the dry riverbed, but they were surrounded. One of the armed men ran straight into a patrol unit that had circled behind them. He froze, dropped his weapon. Others tried to flee, but helicopters thundered overhead. The sound alone shook the ground. Within minutes, several attackers were captured. The rest disappeared deeper into the bush. Silence slowly returned. The wind moved through the tall grass again. Traoré arrived at the riverbed shortly after. He looked at the captured men. "Why?" he asked calmly. No one answered at first. One of the attackers finally spoke. "We were paid," he said quietly. "By who?" Traoré demanded. The man hesitated, but fear was stronger than loyalty. "Foreign sponsors. They want chaos. They want the North unstable." The soldiers looked at each other. The president's face hardened. "They burn food. They attack farmers. They think we are weak," he said. He turned to his commanders. "This is bigger than a truck. They want to break our unity." He stepped forward, his voice rising. "They will learn today that Burkina Faso stands together." As the captured attackers were taken away, villagers slowly returned to watch from a distance. For them, this was more than a military operation. It was protection. It was reassurance. It was a message. The sun stood high in the sky now, burning hot over the savannah. But something stronger than the heat was rising. Resolve. And the operation was not over. The remaining attackers were still out there. And President Traoré had made one thing clear. He would not stop. Just when the country thought the danger was ending, the real mastermind revealed himself. Night fell over northern Burkina Faso. The sky was dark and wide. Stars covered the horizon. but the bush was not peaceful. Military camps were set up near the dry riverbed. Floodlights cut through the darkness. Soldiers stood guard. Radios crackled with updates. Inside a temporary command tent, captured attackers sat on the ground, guarded closely. Their faces were tired. Their clothes were covered in dust. President Ibrahim Traoré entered the tent. The room became silent. He looked directly at the man who had spoken earlier. "You said you were paid," Traoré said calmly. "Who sent you?" The man hesitated again. Sweat rolled down his face. Then he spoke. "They don't want stability," he whispered. "They want fear. They want the people to lose trust." "Who?" Traoré repeated firmly. The man lowered his head. "Foreign networks, working with local criminals. They told us to attack food supply routes, to burn trucks, to make it look like the government cannot protect the north." The soldiers exchanged shocked looks. Traoré's eyes burned with anger, but his voice stayed controlled. "They attacked tomatoes today," he said slowly. "Tomorrow they attack schools, then markets, then villages." He stepped closer. "You will tell us everything." Outside the tent, another urgent message arrived. A patrol unit had discovered a hidden camp deeper in the bush. Motorcycles, fuel containers, weapons. "They are preparing more attacks," a commander reported. Traoré did not hesitate. "Move now." Within minutes, armored vehicles roared back into the darkness. Helicopters lifted into the sky again. Dust swirled under powerful lights. The operation was fast, precise, silent. As troops surrounded the hidden camp, one of the attackers tried to escape on a motorcycle. A spotlight caught him in the darkness. He lost control and fell into the sand. More men were arrested. Weapons were seized. Documents were found: maps of supply roads, notes about market days, lists of transport routes. It was organized. It was planned. It was bigger than anyone imagined. Back at the burned truck site, villagers gathered again the next morning. This time, soldiers were there to protect them. President Traoré stood on the dusty road where red stains still marked the ground. Cameras recorded his speech. "My people," he began, his voice strong. "This land belongs to us. Our farmers feed our nation. No criminal, no sponsor of chaos will break our unity." He raised his hand toward the north. "They want Africa divided. They want us weak. But today, we showed them something." He paused. "We stand together." The crowd cheered. Women raised their hands in the air. Young men shouted with pride. The driver of the burned truck stood in the front row, tears in his eyes. Traoré continued. "This is not only Burkina Faso's fight. This is Africa's fight. When one farmer is attacked, all Africans are attacked. When one road burns, we rebuild it together." The sun shone bright over the savannah. The smoke was gone. The ashes were still there. But something stronger had replaced fear, hope, and determination. The operation had crushed the network in the north. But the message was clear. Burkina Faso would not kneel, and its president would not hide. The story was no longer about a truck of tomatoes. It had become a symbol of resistance, of unity, of a continent that refuses to burn. What started as a burning truck became a message to all of Africa. The news spread beyond northern Burkina Faso. Images of the burned tomatoes, the black smoke rising into the sunset, the president standing in the dust. Across West Africa, radio stations replayed the speech of Ibrahim Traoré again and again. "This is not only Burkina Faso's fight, this is Africa's fight." Those words traveled far. In the northern villages, life slowly returned. Farmers repaired fences. Children went back to school. Market women cleaned the road where the truck had burned. But soldiers now guarded the highways. New checkpoints were built. Drones continued to watch the skies. The government launched what it called Operation Safe Harvest, a nationwide security plan to protect farmers, transport routes, and rural markets. Convoys of trucks now traveled with military escort. The message was clear. Food is national security. One afternoon, President Traoré returned to the same road. But this time, he came with farmers. A new truck stood there, freshly painted, loaded again with bright red tomatoes. The same driver was behind the wheel. He was nervous. Traoré walked up to him. "You are not alone anymore," the president said. The driver nodded slowly. Around them, Soldiers stood watch. Villagers gathered quietly. Then something powerful happened. Traoré stepped aside and signaled. The truck engine started. Slowly, it moved forward. No gunshots, no flames. Just the sound of wheels on dry earth. The crowd began to clap. Some cried. It was not just a truck moving. It was courage returning. Later that evening, Traoré addressed the nation again. He stood under the open sky, the savannah behind him. "They tried to burn our food," he said. "They tried to break our trust. They tried to make us afraid." His voice grew stronger. "But Africa is not weak. We are rising. We protect our land. We protect our people. And we protect our future." He looked directly into the camera. "To those who sponsor chaos from far away, we see you, and we are ready." The speech ended with 3 words. United, we win. Across the country, young people shared the moment online. Farmers felt seen. Soldiers felt respected. Families felt safer. The attack that was meant to create fear had done the opposite. It created unity, and in the quiet northern savannah, where the dry grass still moved with the wind, the road remained open. Guarded, watched, alive. The fire that once burned tomatoes had ignited something else. A fierce promise. Burkina Faso would stand, and Africa would not bow. They thought it would end with ashes. They were wrong. Weeks after the attack, northern Burkina Faso looked different. The dry grass still moved under the hot wind. The sun still burned the earth. But the roads were alive again. Trucks moved in convoys. Farmers worked their fields. Children walked to school without fear. Where the first truck had burned, a small sign now stood beside the road. "We protect our harvest." President Ibrahim Traoré returned one last time to the north, not for war, but for rebuilding. He met with farmers under a simple tree. No big stage, no luxury. Just dust, chairs, and people. One old farmer stood up. "They burned our tomatoes," the man said, "but they did not burn our courage." The crowd murmured in agreement. Traoré looked around at the faces, tired, strong, determined. "This land feeds us," he said. "And anyone who attacks our food attacks our nation." He paused. "But we will not answer with fear. We will answer with strength, with unity, with African dignity." The government announced new investments. More protection for rural roads. Support funds for farmers affected by violence. Training programs for young people to defend and develop their communities. Security forces remained active. Networks of criminals were dismantled. Investigations continued. But something deeper had changed. People felt seen. In one powerful moment, Traoré visited the family of a wounded soldier from the operation. The soldier's arm was bandaged, but he stood proudly. "You defended Burkina Faso," the president told him. The soldier replied quietly, "We defended Africa." That sentence spread across the country. At sunset, the president stood alone for a moment near the rebuilt road. The sky turned orange again, just like the day of the attack. But this time, there was no smoke, only peace. A truck passed by, full of tomatoes. The driver honked once. Traoré watched it disappear into the horizon. "They tried to make us collapse," he said softly to an aide beside him. "But they reminded us who we are." The camera pulls back. The vast savannah stretches endlessly, dry grass glowing in the evening light. Roads cutting across the land like lines of hope. A voiceover closes the story. In northern Burkina Faso, a truck once burned, but from its ashes rose a stronger promise. To protect the harvest, to defend the people, to stand united as one Africa. The sun sets, the screen fades to black, and the message remains. United, we rise.